The darkness of the night illuminated with a mysterious light. Has the prophecy of Fatima and Garabandal just slipped in front of our eyes, but the world did not see it? Question mark. The geomagnetic storm that began November 5th continued for the third day, increasingly spreading to southward latitudes. While NASA remains blissfully unaware, many of us are nervous about it all. Witnesses of Nibiru are convinced that a comet planet is behind the crimson lights. However, representatives of other religious dogmas think in a slightly different direction, and these thoughts are quite alarming. In 2003, a magnetic storm of the century took place on planet Earth, and spaceweather.com wrote a separate article about this storm, listing every satellite that crashed. However, no auroras were observed in the southern parts of Europe. The only time something like this happened after 1859 was the phenomenon of January 1938, about which the New York Times wrote January 26, 1938. London, January 25, 1938. The aurora borealis, rarely seen in the southern or western Europe, tonight spread fear in parts of Portugal and Lower Austria, while thousands of Britons were brought running into the streets in wonderment. The red glow made many think about the end of the world as London burned. People called the Windsor Fire Department because they thought Windsor Castle was on fire. The lights were clearly visible in Italy. That means the aurora lights, the northern lights. Spain and even Gibraltar. The lights bathed snow-capped mountain peaks in Austria and Switzerland were a beautiful sight, but firefighters responded to reports that they were chasing fires that did not exist. Portuguese residents rushed out of their homes in fear, fearing the onset of the apocalypse. Aurora borealis seen in Europe. Reading old newspaper is always educational. For example, people called the Windsor Fire Department because they thought Windsor Castle was on fire. Windsor Castle is the residence of the British monarchs, who, according to statistics, are loved by no more than half of the British people. And people saw fire in the royal residence and became worried. And we read further, residents of Portugal rushed from their homes in fear, fearing the onset of the apocalypse. Why did people in England think that Windsor Castle was burning? And in Portugal, everyone immediately thought about the apocalypse. On July 13, 1917, the following was conveyed to Lucia Santos in Portugal. We're talking about the Fatima. Now, quote, "You have seen hell where the souls of poor sinners go. To save them, God wishes to establish in the world devotion to the Immaculate Heart. If what I say to you is done, many souls will be saved and there will be peace. The war will end soon, but if people do not stop insulting God, a worse war will begin under Pope Pius XI. When you see that the darkness of the night is illuminated with a mysterious light, like day, know that this great sign has been given to you from God, that he is going to punish the world for its crimes through war, famine, and persecution of the Church and the Holy Father," end quote. Therefore, as soon as the sky over France suddenly turned red, many people immediately remembered the second secret of Fatima, which was and remains in the public domain. Now let's remember what followed this strange atmospheric phenomenon, and it was followed by March 1938, the Anschluss of Germany and Austria, which essentially began the Second World War, and how many people think of it as the sky was on fire before the Second World War, and then it will also be on fire before the Third World War. The prophecy began to come true. The First World War actually ended soon, but people did not stop insulting God, and another conflict began, even worse, the Second World War. But there is one interesting fact. Lucia, one of the girls, published the prophecy of the Virgin Mary in writing, and only in 1940, that is, when the Second World War had already begun and the First had ended. In addition, it's curious that the prophecy directly named Pope Pius XI, when the apparition of the Virgin Mary took place, which was 1917, Benedict XV occupied the papal throne, and Pius XI became Pope in 1922. In this regard, the question arises, either the Mother of God also predicted the name of the future Pope who occupied the papal throne until 1939, or Lucia added a little of her own. What can be said about the sign when, quote, the darkness of the night was illuminated with light as day, end quote, which was supposed to herald the beginning of the war? According to confirmed data, in the winter of 1938, the northern lights were observed throughout Europe, which could be that very sign. This radiance was observed even in the south of Europe, in Galicia, Spain, where at that time Sister Lucia lived, and the only survivor of the eyewitnesses of the appearance of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Lucia immediately saw that the northern lights, that same omen of the Virgin Mary, even Pope Pius XI in the Vatican saw this inexplicable northern lights over Europe. Second warning, surprisingly, it coincided that there is a second warning on this score, similar to Fatima. It was given in Spain, in the town in San Sebastian de Garabandal in the early 1960s, where the Virgin Mary, who appeared to the children, warned that very serious events were coming, against the backdrop of which the Second World War would seem frivolous, and the harbinger of this would be signs in the skies. Although many Catholics and Protestants now think that these are the signs that the world is seeing, we believe that this is something wrong. We think that the apocalypse is something larger, and therefore there will be something else in the sky. And not only in the sky, Garabandal's prophecy is literally about this. What the world sees in the sky now is an omen that the main sign is beginning, and what was predicted in Garabandal is the onset for the Last of Us events to come true. And this is on Solask. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.